welcome back to another podcast by Dragon Media. My name is Jackson Amick, and I'm here with
Adeline, Shilling.
And today we're going to be talking about The Social Network, which was a movie made in 2010 about the founding of Facebook and the lawsuits and drama that happened in between then and the now. The Social Network focuses on how Mark Zuckerberg, being a Harvard undergrad with a major in computer science, is put on academic probation for making the website Face Smash. Afterwards, he was approached by the Winklevoss twins in order to make the Harvard connection. The Winklevoss twins, quote-unquote, hire Mark to make the Harvard connection for them, or not make it, but to test it out, see if it's possible. And for almost 3 months, I want to say, maybe 2.5, he goes basically radio silent, giving no constructive feedback to the Winklevoss twins, doing nothing to really look at the Harvard connection and see if it's possible. And then after a few weeks of radio silence from Mark, he drops the Facebook. It is about the same idea as the Harvard connection, but it's more accessible and it's a little bit different in some ways. The Winklevoss twins get upset. They go to the dean, to a few other people, trying to get back at Mark and get money back for the idea that he quote-unquote stole from them. After this, Mark starts to gain traction with the Facebook, and he quickly becomes one of the youngest billionaires ever, but that leads to drama between him and his original friend group of founders, and it causes lawsuits, legal troubles, and a fallout between all of them. So something I noticed about the movie being different from the actual story is that the movie is dramatized so much. It's expected for a Hollywood movie to, try to keep the watcher's attention and all that, but the movie really just focuses too much on the little details, and it doesn't really focus on the things that are important. So Mark himself actually was quoted to say, the movie got the shirt that he wore a lot correct, but they couldn't get the coding aspects right. They didn't focus much on coding. They didn't really focus on the work that was put into making Facebook, and it was more about the drama. The real story was really tame. It was not as wild as the movie made it out to be. It was just a bunch of guys who got together to make a website, and they had some falling out, which is normal for friend groups, but the movie dramatized it all the way. The movie just made everything more difficult to understand for people. So it would take really small details and make them more important than they needed to be, or they'd take details that were super important and just completely get rid of them. There was one guy who was completely cut out from the movie, Andrew McCullum. He didn't show up at all, wasn't mentioned at all, but he played a really important role in the making of Facebook. So do you think Mark's character was portrayed like he was in real life?
I think he definitely was portrayed like him in real life, because when you're watching the movie, it's not like he's necessarily this super likable character. And of course, Mark, looking back on the movie and watching it, he criticized it, and showing that he criticized that kind of shows even his mistakes, his worst qualities were shown in the movie, and anyone would kind of be offended by that, just because their personalities being shown to the whole world of how they actually are. And I think if Mark looked back on the movie and was wow, they did a great job with this, I really like how they portrayed me, then it wouldn't be real, because nobody's that perfect. And especially someone with Mark, the amount of trouble he went through, and the amount of falling out he had with people, he wasn't necessarily a likable person, and he kind of lost everything for money. So it's kind of it's gonna make you look bad. So I think that's mostly why the character was portrayed by him so good, because Mark didn't like it himself.
Me personally, I felt like he was made to be a little bit more of a genius than he really was. Mm-hmm. They made him seem really, really arrogant and socially inept, kind of like an incel, I want to say, because of the way that he was treating, what was her name? Erica something?
Yeah.
I forget her name.
The girl at the beginning of the movie?
Yeah, the girl that broke up with him. It just made him seem like a very insecure, and they tried to play into the misunderstood genius part a lot, but it just didn't come across as being genuine. It was more just I don't really know how else to say this, but he came across as a total jerk. So that's how it is for me. I feel like they mostly stayed true to the point with him, but they just, again, they dramatize everything to the max.
Because, they also made him seem kind of out of touch with reality at the start. Like, when I first watched the beginning, that beginning conversation, I was kind of like, is something, like, wrong with him? Like, it was like, I was, like, confused. Like, I literally, like, I don't know. There's something weird.
He was just really elitist, you mean?
Yes, like, it was, like, I feel like that part was definitely dramatized. Just because it was so, like, awkward.
Out of touch.
Yes, it was so out of touch. Does the movie give any insight into how Facebook has, like, progressed through time?
So, in the movie, it shows how Facebook went from just being run on some crappy computers and servers at Harvard campus to moving to California and talking to investors in New York and all other places. It doesn't give you it doesn't hold your hand and tell you how they progress, but you can see based off the setting changes of how far along they are in the process. Like whenever they first go to California to, I think they were going to UCLA, was that it? Or was it some other place?
Don't remember.
All right. So whenever they were going to California to expand into other colleges and university campuses with Facebook, they were taking all those videos of everyone, you know how they were on the roof and they were ziplining off and then the chimney just blows up basically. So for me, that was like the startup stage where it's just, they're not really taking everything super seriously. They're having fun, but they're making everything. And then there's the part where you see them in actual offices. That's the part where it becomes a legitimate business. That's the, okay, this is a real serious thing. Let's treat it as such. So it doesn't tell you how Facebook progresses, but you can infer based off everything that changes around the characters and even in their attitudes. Like Mark becomes a lot more, I want to say, like analytical and calculating, because with Sean Parker, I think that's his name, the guy who was
Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, you had an obsession with him, didn't you? So he was shown to be at that party, you know, and he was caught with minors and all that, doing drugs, and he calls Mark, and then Mark just lets him go. Just no questions asked. Mark is like, yeah, you're done. You're out of here. So for me, I think that if Mark was still the kind of person he was at the beginning of the story, he probably would have been more accepting of him. So each character, as the story progresses and Facebook progresses, they all change in ways that parallel how Facebook is being made. So are there any certain events that were just completely made up?
There are definitely events that were definitely made up. In the beginning of the movie, his intentions were like completely wrong. In the movie, it portrays him as being heartbroken, and then he makes face mash because he just like is just going at it at women, and in reality, that didn't happen. And
he didn't make face mash?
Well, he did. In reality, he didn't get heartbroken, and like he wasn't like just creating that just because of that bad breakup. Mark said like there was an interaction with a woman that kind of inspired the directors to kind of create that event just to, you know, make the movie more interesting, because if it was just an event where Mark said something to one person that didn't really matter, it's obviously not even, it's going to be so confusing why he kind of had that intention to make face mash. But in reality, he later met his now wife during the story. So it's just like,
what part of the story? Like beginning, middle, end?
I think it's towards the middle. Maybe even like the middle beginning.
All right. So like whenever they were...
Yeah, like he wasn't like completely heartbroken. Like he was like, it's just like his intentions were completely twisted. And so like in the beginning of the movie, it just completely changes that. It completely makes up his intentions and just completely alters the story. And also that kind of like differs from when I said Mark was portrayed like pretty perfectly how he actually is in the story, but that's really not, because from the first moment you see him, that's a complete lie. So it's kind of like it goes back and forth whether he's kind of like it or not, but it kind of changes your perspective when you think, oh, Mark made this thing just because he was heartbroken over his girlfriend, when really that's just not the truth. Does the movie add details to make the story seem like more interesting?
So the movie adds in a few details that weren't really there in the real story. Like, for example, Sean Parker, he had way more power than he really did. Like, in reality, he was just an advisory role and was gathering funding for Facebook in its early days, mid to early days. And he was not like a power hungry, manipulative person. He was definitely hedonistic, like he was a real party guy, but he wasn't like a criminal mastermind who was manipulating Mark behind the scenes. Like that was just a completely dramatized detail that the directors made. And there was also the issue with Eduardo Saverin. So it's implied in the movie that he should have more of an active role in the company. Whenever he gets kicked out, his shares get bought out from him. So the drama between him and Mark is really focused on, but just wasn't there in it wasn't there in real life. It wasn't there. He slowly lost traction as the company progressed until eventually he didn't have as much of an active role as he used to whenever he was gathering funding and talking to investors and getting financial backing. The whole situation with him getting frustrated and smashing up Mark's computer, but it doesn't make sense to me that they would try to, well, it does kind of make sense to me to portray the two who were previously really good friends while they were attending Harvard. It doesn't really make sense to have it be focused on that extremely. Like, sure,
Yeah.
he had a lawsuit and all that, and he was one of the original founders, but to me it would have made more sense if they just focused on how Eduardo was losing relevance and losing like the friendship of Mark. The way they did it just made it seem like the two hated each other, like just absolutely despised. Like they made it seem like Mark was scheming against Eduardo when he left the company because his ownership stake was diluted, but he got a settlement. So the two are not friends. That much the movie got right. But they just upplayed every little part. So along with that, Eduardo, his storyline of like gradually losing the friendship of Mark and being ostracized from the company, having his ownership taken away from him, that was upplayed like all the way. So originally, with the real story, how it actually happened, the two were really good friends whenever they were attending Harvard, and Eduardo was responsible to be the CFO and took an active role in contributing to the growth and development of the company in its early days. He lost relevance as Facebook grew, and he didn't contribute as much as he did then as he did whenever it was at the beginning. He left the company due to his ownership stake being diluted to a really low percentage while everyone else kept theirs at a high percent. Mark had 51%, everyone else had like 13 or 9. And he did sue Mark and he won a settlement for an unknown amount. But in the movie, it seems like Eduardo is like, he has a really active role in the company, and Mark and Sean and everyone else is taking advantage of him. But that's not how it really was. He was losing traction. He was not as active as he used to be within Facebook, and that made it so that his ownership stake was going to be diluted. That's how they decided it, according to Mark. And then there's the details of the Winklevoss twins, how they were super angry at him. They were like, they wanted revenge. They wanted to sue him into the ground. They wanted to take Facebook from him. But in reality, they were just upset more than anything. They weren't like, oh, we're going to kill you, Mark. I hate you. They were like, oh, man, why'd you do that? Like, that's not cool, dude. So that's about it for details being added to the story. There's other things that are just glazed over so that they look prettier. But other than that, that's about it. Are there any events that are left out from the story?
This kind of adds on to like what we've been saying. Like you said that Mark's shirt was correct, but like
They got the small details.
yeah, they got
right,
the small details, but not specifically. But I think there are a lot of events left out just because I feel like the movie focuses so much more on kind of the social interactions between everybody and like the drama and not just like
the founding of Facebook.
Yeah,
they just
like-
focus on the characters' relations.
yes, like it focuses more. That's why you can't really tell if it's kind of supposed to be. It's based off of the real story, and it kind of does it pretty well. But you can tell it is. They do focus on all the entertaining aspects and dramatize those aspects. So I think this movie could obviously be like 4 hours long if it really wanted to get into that. But I just think there's just a lot left out. If you're looking to like watch this movie to like find out how Facebook was founded, how it was made, you're not gonna find that because all of that is left out. And Mark even said like you don't know the real motivations of why he did any of this, and it overlooks like basically almost all of the work that really was put in to create Facebook. Because like you see them coding in the beginning and it's like a little montage and that's it, and it kind of just really focuses on all those other interactions and Mark's troubles with all of his friends and then the Winklevoss twins. So it kind of all those events that like are kind of like underground, they're all left out. Like you don't really see anything except for his social interactions between people. Are relationships between characters represented the same, or were they changed to fit the story in the movie?
So there were a few characters whose relationships between each other were quite a bit different from real life, but again, like they were close enough to where it was like, oh, okay, I can see why they made that change. So to begin, you had Sean Parker. In the movie, he was he was manipulating Mark behind the scenes. He was the puppet master, and then he loses control of his creation, like Frankenstein. That was not like remotely true. That's like the one extreme case that you'll see. Like in reality, he was just an advisory role. That was all he was doing. He was just giving advice to how Facebook should be run, what they should do. Like he was not behind the scenes trying to like split everyone up. He was not like this grand genius who had an evil plan. That was not true at all. There's also the whole relationship between Mark and that girl in the beginning, Erica Albright. Apparently they weren't like you were saying. Apparently they weren't in a relationship. They were just like Mark was just being rude to her one time, and that was it. So that whole relationship was fabricated for the movie to have a jumping off point to where Mark would create Face Mash. And there were just subtle details that were wrong about everything, but they were so small to where you'd be like, oh, is that just an honest mistake? Or maybe they just left that out because it'd be hard to portray in the movie. Like, it's just small things other than the main characters' relationships. So if you were the director of this movie, what changes would you make to make it more realistic?
If I was the director of this movie, I think I would just take a completely different like take on this, because didn't the directors kind of say like they just took the story and kind of like wanted to make they were like, oh, this story seems interesting, we can just make a movie off of it. When I think if I was a director, I kind of pick between if I wanted to be more realistic or if I want to be more entertaining, because I feel like it's completely in the middle. So it kind of gets confusing when you look at it and you're like, oh, can I watch this to see what actually happens, or can I watch this because it's a good movie? And I think it's really in the middle, and I think if I was the directors, I'd pick one. If I was going to make it more entertaining, then I think, but I guess you're saying like what would you change to make it more realistic, but if I were to make it more entertaining, I probably would have changed the characters' names, probably would have completely like changed how some characters acted and even like left some out. But if I were to make it more realistic, I probably would have stuck really to the story, and I would have focused on the actual creation of Facebook, because like yes, they were geniuses, but I feel like if it gave more insight on how the code worked, then it would have been more realistic, because like yes, they're at Harvard, and yes, they're geniuses, but they're also at Harvard. So like, it kind of gets confusing where it's like, well, aren't there probably other geniuses at Harvard? Why couldn't they just do this? Like, it kind of is like questionable as to like why was Mark so special, and like everybody that played into it, like why was this not replicatable? I don't know if that's a word, but like I feel like there weren't any details to show how they kind of like, I guess, were outliers, like how they distanced themselves from other people and showed that they were like
Unique.
yeah.
So, in your opinion, do you think the movie gives a good representation of what really happened? Is it more entertaining? Is it more informative? Is it like in the middle? What do you think?
So I feel like we've definitely touched on this with basically all of our previous questions, but I really feel like it's in the middle. And I feel like that's like my one critique from this movie, which I'm not the person to be critiquing movies. I'm not like that, but I feel like just watching it, it's like and then watching it is one thing, but then going and looking at the real story, it's kind of like, wow, this really is in the middle, and it's kind of like you can't necessarily tell the director's intentions just from watching it because you don't know. It's like, okay, because they definitely did their research and they definitely looked into the story, but then it's hard to tell if they're like wanting to showcase this story like how it was, or if they really just wanted an entertaining movie, because it really is both at the same time. And it kind of just like watching it leads you to asking more questions about what actually happened and like what happened to this person. Like, it's kind of like you watch the movie and you kind of like, you're like, wait, where are these people now? Like, what are they doing? What are they up to now? It's kind of like maybe not good, but it is in between. And
it's decent.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like the movie does give a good representation of what really happened for like your average true story to Hollywood movie. What would you call that? Like rendition?
I don't know what that word means.
Whatever. So it's a good representation of the story for the format that it was told in. And you also have to make a story that is interesting enough to keep people hooked, keeps enough of the information to make it true to real life. And for me, the movie does that pretty well for the format that it's in. And even though it is not focusing on the founding of Facebook, which I feel like was a untapped key point that they should have gone after, it's still a pretty good between entertaining and informative. They make you want to keep watching because you're like, oh my god, why'd they do that? Like, what are they going to do now? Is he going to retaliate? Why does he trust him? It's all that. And then you have your information about each character. Like, you meet the Winklevoss twins and you learn about them being the sons of a rich millionaire billionaire guy. And you see how everybody worked together to make Facebook what it is now. Like, everything in the story is almost perfectly balanced to be between entertaining and informative. They give you enough to make you want to stay there, and they tell you enough so that you're informed about how it was made. But they don't focus on the things that are important. So for that, I'd say it's a little bit more leaning towards entertaining than informative.